kind of like an easy question to ask that every producer around the world would probably always want to work with a real musician if he had the chance.
Welcome to AI Music Unmuted. Real talk by realmusic.ai. The show that talks to experts and thought leaders about tools and truths for musicians in the age of technology and creativity.
Today's guest is Dobrecky, musician, producer, co-founder, and COO at Aiode. Blue, welcome to the Real Music Podcast.
Hey, David, how are you?
I'm excellent. So let's start with you. How did you get to the intersection of music and technology?
Yeah, so I think at the bottom line, it's just the love for both worlds and especially the combination between them. But a little bit more in detail, my background in music is that just fell in love with it thanks to my father, who was actually a percussion player and who took me to all these amazing gigs since I was very young, and just fell in love with the music industry itself. That made me a music producer, had no other choice. I mostly play keys and drums. So that's mostly where my love for music comes from, other than just listening to amazing music. And on the other side, I just love creating things from scratch. So that would be either like building my own guitar pedals, writing code to do these like different types of games. And then really since AI became a little bit more public, even at the beginning of it, before ChatGPT, just fell in love with the opportunities that it could create if worked in the correct way. And the combination between both those worlds, basically just removing all limitations of what you could do if you connect that to the music production world, is just really where I fell in love with the specific intersection between these two different but very similar worlds.
So you could really see the creative side of what you can do with technology as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, once you can remove all limitations, it really comes down to how you use the technology. And hopefully we'll be able to create some world where these technologies can help you do everything on the creative aspects while it take care of the technical aspects of everything that you try to create.
Do you feel like being a musician and a producer and, well, the son of a Grammy Award-winning artist, that you look at technology through a different lens?
Yeah, I mean, today, I think what we're seeing is that AI is getting a pretty bad name, especially in the creative industries, music included there as well, because we fear that it's going to replace the artists themselves. And I think it's a valid concern that we should all be working on. But at the core of it, AI is here to really solve statistical problems. And if we're able to utilize that ability, and it's going to just continue to grow from this point onwards, and if we could utilize that ability to really, again, take care of the technical aspects of your own creation, then hopefully we can make a world where you can use that to make your own productions much better. And I think that's where Aiode comes in as one of the companies working in this field, where hopefully what we'll do is that you as a producer have to focus specifically on the things that you actually want, while not making the AI automate tasks for you, but actually bring in personality as in other collaborators using their virtual selves. And in that way, you'll be able to really have full control over the final creative result, again, while it takes shares of the technical aspect.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think about AI music as putting in text prompts and some magic happens within the software. A rabbit comes out of the hat and you have a song. And while that is probably helpful for, say, a marketing executive who needs to come up with a quick 30-second song to go with some content, it really leaves out the creativity.
Yeah, so I think at this point where we see all these models that, just like you said, are based on like these text prompts and just outputs a full song out of there, it's not really useful for producers in many different aspects, but the main one being that you don't have control over the actual outcome. You could try reprompting it, you could maybe like edit parts of it, but you don't feel like a producer, and rightly so. You don't have control over the aspects within the song itself. Some interesting use cases that I do see using these models are trying to create samples, just like traditionally you would get some sort of sample and then use that within a production. But still, the most important phase afterwards would be to be the producer and use that as a sample and produce a song over that. And I think, again, Aiode, what we're trying to do here is, instead of creating these like super generic models where you just give it some direction of song that you wanted to create and it outputs a full song, instead of there, we're putting the producers at the steering wheel. And maybe I'll just take a step back here and say that the current existing technologies, even if we're not talking about AI at all, to create the layers within your song, are either very, very technical, specifically talking about MIDI or dropping in loops and samples, which is amazing. Not shaming that at all. Really gives you full control over those aspects. But the problem is that the workflow itself is not as creative, and you're limited by the available sounds and options at each one of those different tools. It's kind of like an easy question to ask that every producer around the world would probably always want to work with a real musician if they had the chance. The problem with working with a real musician is that, first of all, the cost, you need to have a studio. And even if you do have that budget and capabilities, you might end up with the recordings that you had in the session. And then afterwards, you just want to tweak that one last thing, but you're not in the recording session anymore. So we just don't have that option. And what Aiode is trying to do is just get the best from both worlds. We work with real musicians and we create their own virtual versions. And when I say virtual versions, it's not something that just sounds like them. It includes everything down to the sound design, but more importantly, the way that they approach music, the way that they listen to a producer's song, the existing tracks, the way that they listen to the instructions. And that way, we're trying to reproduce the flow of a producer sitting with a musician in the studio, letting them listen to what already exists, even if it's nothing, giving them some instructions, and then slowly building from there the final song. So again, that diverts from you having no control over what the AI does to having full control and choosing the personas and specific styles using those different virtual musicians to work with you on the song itself. And importantly, saying that the musicians on the other side will get their own cut out of the usage of their own virtual musicians. So hopefully, again, on the other side, this will help musicians get another revenue stream there, which we all know is a problem. Music doesn't create a good income, at least for most session musicians.
So tell me how that would work, really the compensation part. Anytime music is being disrupted, and we've been through it a bunch of times before, we've gone through it with digital and then, of course, sampling and streaming. And while each of these problems have gotten harder and harder to figure out, and some of them we certainly still haven't solved, we have survived them all. So tell me a little bit around compensation and credit and copyright and how you're looking to solve these problems.
So I think maybe we should approach this in two different aspects. First of all, the models themselves, at the end of the day, are using some sort of data set, and that data set, if it's not legally acquired, if it's not get taken from directly the artist themselves with permission, then that kind of means that you're stealing the data. And if you're not allocating rights back to them or compensating them in any way, especially if it's not permitted, then that kind of means that you're stealing their potential income. And I guess one of the main things we can do is always work with legally and permitted data sets. That's why Aiode is an example here, where we work directly with the musicians and producers to tailor their own personal virtual musicians. So we only work with licensed data that we have. That would be one approach. And in combination with that, once the songs are released, we could talk about trying to divert the royalties back to the people behind the data. But I think the more probable approach here is to find some alternative compensation so that the producers outputting the songs themselves still have full royalties over the song. Same goes with actual musicians. If we compare that to what happens in the studio, usually a session musician gets paid twice. They get paid at the recording itself, and they get paid through the royalties if the song is successful. And sometimes they might choose to get a higher pay in the studio while releasing that compensation down the road using the royalties themselves. And again, here, what Aiode is trying to do is that we're kind of trying to imitate that workflow where we work with the musicians to create their virtual models, and then the producer themselves, when they work with the virtual musicians, get full royalties from everything that's generated within the platform. And the way that we pay the musicians back is through the allocation of how much each virtual musician was used. In other words, their virtual recording hours get paid in that way. It doesn't really matter if the song's successful or not. It doesn't even matter if the song is released. The more that they use that model, the more that the musicians actually get paid. And I think that's a good approach for these type of things.
I mean, it's always been a challenge getting paid and getting paid correctly and fairly. And it's always tough as an artist to make a sustainable career. But this in some ways might even solve a problem that we didn't know we had, or let's say that they can get paid whether the song is a hit or not. Let's chat about streaming platforms. There's a lot of concern in this area. And I guess this is a good transition into discussing the concerns about who's getting paid, how they're getting paid. In some cases, it's, of course, 13 writers on a song. That's an issue nowadays. That money gets put up pretty thin. And we can even put YouTube in the mix here. I saw recently they're changing some of their rules on use of vocals and real vocals versus AI-generated vocals. That seems like an easy starting area for them.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a problematic area because once AI is going to start training on itself, it's going to become so generic that probably it's going to be a fight between those two algorithms, the algorithms that create the actual sounds and the algorithms that try to detect where it came from, down to is this AI generated, and further down to if this is AI generated, which data set was it used on, and should we know who the specific artist that this model is trying to imitate or was using the data from? So it becomes a very difficult field to navigate very fast. And I think all of this can be diverted if we just from the get-go only work with licensed data sets to train these models. And from the get-go, those models, the way that they are used, compensate the people behind them from the get-go. And that means we don't even need to talk about those sort of things. And even more so, the producers working with these different things, even if it's just a song generated from scratch, if at generation those artists were compensated, again, this is only if those artists are willing to relinquish their rights over those royalties. But I am suggesting that because that would mean that they're probably going to get paid more. There are more songs being generated than songs that are being generated and are successful.
So is this something you think that needs to be regulated more? I know we have a lot to figure out, but can we count on people just policing themselves or doing this in a more ethical way?
I think a combination of all of these, because at the end of the day, it needs to be policed a little bit more. Maybe not even a little, but it needs to be policed more so that we don't see like these huge copyright infringements. And at the same time, the real change won't come from policing it. It will come from the industry itself. I think once the industry itself is able to adopt these technologies using um, specific technologies that they approve of, it will be just a little bit more convenient for the producers behind them to work with these technologies again from the get-go. And if they approve of the way that these technologies are working, then again, we don't have any of these problems. So in other words, it's acceptance. We need to know that this is going to be the next step in music production. And once we accept that fact, I'm sure we're going to focus on making this so that the industry itself still exists and works in the best way possible, meaning both the artists and the companies and the record labels and the model creators are all compensated and work together. Because if it's not, something is going to be broke.
Yeah, I suppose one easy solution, or at least starting solution by the DSPs, is labeling. But, it's a spectrum. I don't know where you decide if something is generative versus just assisted, and where you put that label on and how you label it. They're really going to have to figure that out. I mean, at the end of the day, it's all music created for people, but sometimes by machines.
Yeah. I mean, just like you said, there's a full spectrum of how much AI was involved in like the final song. Like the extreme side being AI just created the whole thing. Maybe even it wrote the prompt for himself. And the other side being, I'm a producer, I did everything for myself, but maybe I talked with ChatGPT to get ideas for chords. That in some way is a little bit influenced by the output of the AI itself. So I think just like you're saying, we shouldn't approach this in like a Boolean way, not either AI made or not. There's a full spectrum there. And that's why we need to divert the reasoning and the policing and the way that we need to compensate the artist, not from the actual release of the song, but down to the models themselves and how they are created, what's allowed to be used, so on and so forth. I think labeling the outputs themselves is a good way to do this. But it's not definitive because again, if you have a sample that was AI generated and you put it into the mix, then that labeling can be a little bit removed and blurred, it's called. And the algorithms will then will have a lot of a harder time understanding what the AI is. In other words, again, I think from the get-go, we need to make sure that the industry itself takes in the fact that we're going to work in this sort of way. And once they accept that fact, we'll be able to work all together to create these amazing tools and technologies from all the different points in the spectrum that everyone approves of and works with. Just like it happened with MIDI, just like it happens with loops and samples, so on and so forth, even sampling.
I mean, we've been co-creating with technology for a long time. It's a real opportunity here to be able to co-create with technology. Today, it's saying AI. 10 years from now, it'll be something different, some next level of AI. But what do you think is the real opportunity as you think about it through a musician and producer's lens? AI gets progressively faster over time. Right now, every year is like a decade of progress.
Yeah, definitely. Uh, I mean, in about that time, I'm hoping at least we'll see that it's not going to be as specific thing that is going to be changing the whole industry. Just like you said, it might be a thing after AI. But again, I think the approach itself should be, let's have as many options as possible for producers and even just people who want to make music have the ability to do it in any different way that fits them specifically, while the technology takes as much care of the technical aspect while you put the person in charge of the creative aspect. And that could go from what we're doing right now, which is let's layer the different channels within the music and you having to work with someone that seems like it's a real person, that sounds like it's raw audio, closely imitating the way that you would work with a real person. Again, I don't think that will ever be as good as actually sitting in the studio and working with a real musician. There's nothing that's going to beat the eye-to-eye contact and listening together to a song and just vibing to it. So I think that's one of the first steps. But down the road, hopefully that will help you do everything down to editing and mixing, while the direction itself, and without losing any amount of control, there's still always going to be technical things that we need to do. And if AI could take care of that, will just help us create better songs faster, with more depth and with more artistic direction. Down to, and this is one of the dreams of mine, is that imagine if you would be able to just, me at least, I always like have ideas for songs in my head. I really want some sort of way to bring them out. This is not something that Aiode is doing, at least not at the moment, but hopefully there's some day you're going to be a technology we can just think about a song and at least the idea itself could somehow be turned physical or turned into actual audio that will be able to give someone else. I think that it's pretty probable that a few years down the line, something like this would exist. And this is another example of you being in charge, having the ideas, and using technology to help you get that out.
So it's funny, just not with music. You hear a lot about one of the opportunities of AI, of course, is efficiency. Recently, I heard about a study where they took dozens of companies and almost 1,000 employees, and they brought them down to a 4-day work week, still paid them for all 5 days, got rid of BS meetings. They were efficient. Of course, they implemented AI. That's a big part of the study. And, people's morale was, of course, a lot better. But really, the big change was that they had more time to do things that they wanted to do outside of work. A benefit for, I guess, a working musician is that AI can give them the opportunity through efficiencies to do a lot more of the type of work or type of music that they want to do.
Yeah, exactly. And that goes both ways, because efficiency at the end of the day comes down to I can do what I did in less time, but I think producers at the end of the day want to work like all the time, and they just the amount of time they're going to spend in the song is probably going to be a bit the same. So the efficiency there goes to a direction where you could just have more work done within the song. The efficiency will allow you to focus on the actual things that you want to do. And I think we talked last time about an example through MIDI, where if you have an idea for an example, a piano part. So MIDI is amazing in that way, where it's able to give you the samples that already sound like a very good recording of real piano. And then you can focus on, let's give these specific notes, but that forces you to think like you were the pianist and you want to think about what exact notes are playing at every single time, control all those different parameters at every single note level. Instead of you working with a musician, maybe for example, what's important to you is that they do this specific arpeggio and these are the specific chords and you want this sort of texture. And then that specific musician, being another musical mind that joins your song, will be able to help you find the perfect part in there. So again, even if you have everything in mind down to the specific notes that you want to do, and you could do that with MIDI, but at the end, you're going to find yourself humanizing it, just making sure that it sounds real. And that's eliminated if AI could help you make these things sound much more not only real, but tailored to what you're specifically looking for, where you can focus on what's important to you. A different example might be guitar. Maybe I want these chords, I want you to play with a pick, but I need some ideas for maybe what the riff would be. Or I just want a very cool guitar solo. I'm not a guitarist myself. So let's hear many variations of different guitar solos and see how that can be inserted into my song. Suddenly that becomes much, much more efficient.
Do you think that there's certain parts of your process as a musician, as a producer, that are never going to be handed off to AI?
Definitely. I mean, it goes down to listening. That will never be on the side of the musician, sorry, of the AI itself. Um, I mean, it's funny saying that because one of our core specialities in our all model is that it's able to listen to your production, and that way it knows how to fit itself genre-wise. But in terms of you as a music listener, not the producer itself, they're going to be at the end of the day person deciding what music you're going to listen to, and that AI will never be able to replace because we are the humans that music is supposed to be created for. So that obviously is one side. And I think another thing here is that the approach is that the lead artist on our side, at least in Aiode, we're trying to, that's why we don't have vocals, for example, currently in the product itself, because we want to make sure that the people behind the song are still in the spotlight. They are the person in control and they're focusing on what they want to achieve there. And the cool statistic is that 90% of music is created through MIDI. And when I'm saying 90%, it's not 90% of songs, it's 90% of every song. So that 10% is usually, the vocals and some instruments that are very hard to imitate using MIDI. So let's leave that to the real human beings, and hopefully that other 90%, let's also bring back to musicians through AI collaborating between the producers and the actual musicians behind the scenes.
If the musician is always in the spotlight and we're doing things to help them be better, to be more efficient, to be more creative, then the spotlight will only shine brighter.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed.
I saw a TED Talk really early on in the AI years that talked about how effective AI can be in education. And a lot of people at that time certainly weren't thinking that would be an area. You bring a tutor in a room, 10, 20, 30 students. Sometimes there's a set curriculum, but even if they can work with individual students, it's really hard for somebody to understand as optimally as they can how that person learns, adjust to their learning style, know perhaps what day they're not having good days, not learning as well. And AI can really make those kind of adjustments. So I think it's a little bit what you're saying from a music angle. It probably has a ways to go, but learning your style, especially when you're being collaborative, will be a big part of this in the future.
Yeah, definitely. I think where you're touching is can be summed up to personalization. If a teacher, just because of technical constraints, has to work with multiple students at the same time, that's kind of the same thing as saying if you're looking through samples, those samples weren't created specifically for you, right? So you need to find something that doesn't only fit like the style and timbre that you want, but matches the tempo, matches the chords, matches the like structure of your song itself. So again, in that world, if you were able to make something that always listens to your song and only gives you results from infinite possibilities, but all of them should match the actual song that you're working on, then that's a personalization step. But on the other side, I want to say that I think on the human side, we are able to just both as teachers and as musicians to work and make something that's much more specialized for a specific need, be it a specific student or a song that a musician is recording on. The problem is the technical constraints. The teacher has to teach a lot because it's not efficient to teach a single person. A musician needs to get lots of gigs and not focus on just one because money is an object in this world. So again, I think this is where these technologies can help also on the other side. Just an example, my father, even though he had like a really cool career, he still finds himself having to choose the gigs that pay the most and not the ones that interest him and on the creative side. So if we're able to augment his career and make sure that other people around the world can work with his virtual version while him still getting compensated, and those people who weren't able to work with him at all now have the opportunity to work with him, hopefully that'll create a world where him and other musicians around the world will be able to focus on what they actually want, which is the personalization aspect. Work more time on every project, on the project that you actually want to do, and have more artistic expression through your career.
Yeah. Do you think there's new roles or jobs or say job types that will come because of AI? We think about AI as replacing people, but I think that there's going to be some real new roles out there.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, time will tell. Well, we'll see how it goes. But I can have like two immediate things that come to mind. One, let's call it on the pessimistic side, and one on the optimistic side. Pessimistic is, I think, in the short term, we'll probably see jobs which are use technology to detect if things were created with AI. That'll probably become a job of itself, just to work on finding the different things and making sure, doesn't matter if you're like a streaming company or a label, just tailoring the content that you're getting in. That would be one side. And on the more optimistic side, I think just like you said, um, once technologies make things more efficient, it goes in two different directions. You get people that are much more broad in their understanding. So that's why we see like producers that are completely in the box and produce songs from beginning down to the mastering all by themselves, just because the technology itself is so efficient. And that's where other jobs need to be able to help them focus on what tools they need to work with, just like you're saying, criticism on even what songs are getting out. And on the other side, there are people that are getting specialized on these specific efficient technologies. So if you're talking about ChatGPT, we're talking about prompt engineering and other technologies, music related, that would be using these specific technologies. So like people that are like super proficient in MIDI, we would have people that are super proficient in specific models and working with them to create it. I like think of it as just different synthesizers. It's a new way of creating sounds, just like there are people that are super sufficient in synthesizers in general, or even a specific synthesizer, probably going to be people that are super sufficient in specific AI models.
Today, simple things like stem separation, looking for artifacts to be able to tell if it's AI generated. And there's a lot of software coming out to do this, but I think that there'll be some new roles in music. I think about how AI can make you sound like someone else, and that's, I guess, where AI gets a bad name. If you're using AI to expand your craft, to develop your own sound, and keep you in the spotlight, you're the creator. That's where the human-centric possibilities, I think, can really happen.
Definitely. Again, here I'm going to take MIDI as I think a good example of what happened once you had those opportunities of having that amazing grand piano. As a person that works in the box, didn't have the option of even recording, then the immediate result of the industry was, this isn't fair. It's not a budget thing anymore. Anyone can have any sound. This is going to ruin music. Suddenly, everyone can sound the same. But I think the result of that is that our listening abilities just got better. You're now not focused on which sounds are in the song, but at the actual quality of the music, and does it touch you? Are you excited about the specific music? So again, as the longer and more efficient we make these technologies, I think the more focused we are going to be, not on what's the actual sounds within the song, but is this song something that I feel? Is this music something that I like? And that way, artists can focus much more on creating their own tailored styles, approaching to specific audiences, rather than just making stuff a little bit more generic.
Who knew 40 years ago that we'd be talking about MIDI as something limiting?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Do you think it's an issue that AI can help you develop music? And there's been other technologies as well that doesn't require you to understand note scales and the basics of music theory.
I love music theory. I'm a deep music theory person. But I think some of the most exciting music came out of people who specifically chose new approaches, and be it through technology, just creating different sounds or new ideas about how to approach harmony, for example, always going to bring something new to music. So with these new technologies, I think it's cool ways to just explore what's even possible. And that's one of the negative sides of what like these general text to music models have. They're limited by the distribution and data set that they already have. They'll never be able to invent new types of music. And I do think AI will get to that point at some time. But right now, it's not something that's really possible. And the human beings behind there will be able to think and improve and do new creative things just using these technologies.
So I had a little bit of a deep thought here. Do you ever think there'll be a time, or I guess a use case, where AI generated music will be created for AI listeners and not humans? I guess we're thinking about algorithmic environments or digital agents.
I mean, definitely, definitely. I mean, it's probably going to be a good way to fine tune those models. If you have a model that is able to imitate human listening, that's probably a good way to make sure that the models are outputting good things. But again, I think we are a good example in this. We are trying to work on these models that are going to help us make the models much more like sufficient and actually match the musicians that we're working with. But at the end of the day, there's nothing that's going to replace that. Me myself, I'm actually the person that listens to most of the samples that are generated from the models, just to make sure and understand like their musical qualities. Is it similar to the real musician? Is it listening to the instructions? Is it matching the harmony of the playback? so on and so forth. So we still need those human ears, but yeah, I definitely agree that's something that's going to happen and probably be much more implemented, just improve these different models.
So one of the reasons for starting realmusic.ai is to create an environment that gets away from the BS and the AI is coming for us all and a lot of the noise that's on the internet, particularly YouTube. So really, Blue, your thoughts and perspective have been really refreshing, and I hope everyone else has enjoyed listening to them. So what's coming up next for IoT?
The main things here is that we're just going to continue improving the product. And that means a few different directions. We're going to add more musicians, more versatility of those specific musicians. The models themselves are going to sound better, are going to react musically better. I think more importantly, you're going to have more control over their outputs. As we speak right now, you're able to control them using musical instructions such as I want you to play solo, melody. You can even go down to I want you to play with a pick rather than your fingers, which amplifiers, so on and so forth. But I think what's missing and the things that we're working on right now are stuff like give it specific notes, give it the specific harmony you want it to go after. That way you can work from scratch with these musicians as well. We're going to have a desktop version that you can finally download and make sure that everything that's generated can just drop directly into your DAW so that the workflow itself is much smoother between the producers and their own workflow. That way you don't need to divert or change the whole thing. I'm super excited to see these new models because they're going to have just much more richer understanding of how music works and how to interact with the producer. And maybe finally can have a little bit more time working with these virtual musicians to create my own music as well. So I'm excited for that.
So I love what you're doing, and tell us, where can people find IoT?
So first of all, aiode.com, which is aiode.com. You get some different subscriptions and anything that matches the specific amount of generation that you want and the feature that you're looking for. And I just wanted to say here at the end that, David, I think what you guys are doing is super, super important. And we touched upon this a little back, but just communication within the industry, especially talking about producers and labels, just understanding where the technologies are going and just aligning what everyone needs so that both the technology companies and the actual producers can be on the same page of what we need and how we can make it happen. So I think it's super, super important, the work that you're doing.
So Blue, a great way to end it is I know you have a favorite Michael Lee quote, which is?
Yeah, yeah. So he said that the best music is the best combination between mind, booty, and soul. And since he said that, I find that in every single song that I listen to, is it groovy? Does it make you think? And do you feel it? And I think it's a great way to sum up every good song.
And AI can enhance that.
Thank you so much, David.
Let's wrap this up and go make some music. Thanks for listening, everyone. Keep an eye on realmusic.ai as we continue over time to build out an online community. Discord's coming, social media. So check us out, check out IoT, and thanks for listening.